Hello everyone. Today I want to talk to you about SMIC saying that more and more Chinese chip companies are surpassing their foreign competitors. In addition, the Russia-Ukraine war is facing major changes, with the chances of a ceasefire in place increasing, and there is an opportunity for the US and Russia to reach a deal, leaving Ukraine out. Earlier, US President Trump issued what he called a final ultimatum for a ceasefire to Russia, while at the same time sending Special Envoy Witkoff to visit Russia. On August 6th, Witkoff met with Russian President Putin at the Kremlin. The public doesn't know what was discussed between the US and Russia, but Trump said that the talks made significant progress and that he would meet with Putin soon. Although afterwards, there was a lot of noise from Ukrainian President Zelensky and French President Macron. Zelensky wanted to have face-to-face peace talks with Putin, while Macron called on Russia to immediately implement a ceasefire and start negotiations first. But these people simply have no way to influence the overall situation of the Russia-Ukraine war. A statement from Ukrainian Prime Minister Tusk is worth noting. On August 8th, after a phone call with Zelensky, he said that the conflict in Ukraine might be paused. At a press conference, Tusk said that there are some signals, it's an intuition, that perhaps the conflict will stop. I don't want to say it will end, but if the conflict does stop, that situation is getting closer to us, and that's hopeful. Tusk said that Zelensky is very cautious, but still optimistic. Ukraine hopes that Poland and other European countries will play a role in planning the ceasefire and the eventual peace solution, but it seems that this wish will be hard for Poland to fulfill. However, Putin's moves are worth paying attention to. August 8th was the deadline for the US ultimatum to Russia regarding a ceasefire. The US didn't take any action, but Putin has been making moves one after another. In just one day, he made 5 phone calls to Uzbek President Mirziyoyev, Kazakh President Tokayev, Belarusian President Lukashenko, Indian Prime Minister Modi, and our own President Xi Jinping. According to foreign media and the analysis by Natankin, the theme of Putin's calls with foreign leaders was the same, to brief them on the recent contacts and communications between Russia and the United States. The signs indicate the Russia-Ukraine conflict reached a critical turning point. The Russia-US relationship may also undergo significant changes. Among the 5 phone calls, the one that drew most attention was undoubtedly the call to China. Xinhua news agencies report on the conversation between Chinese and Russian leaders was lengthy, and it included the phrase "at the request of China," meaning Putin initiated the call. The Xinhua report covered Putin's remarks, in which he explained Russia's perspective on the current situation of the Ukraine crisis as well as the recent contacts and communications between Russia and the United States. He said that Russia highly appreciates China's constructive role in seeking a political solution to the crisis, and that the comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination between Russia and China will not change under any circumstances. Russia is willing to continue maintaining close communication with China. President Xi elaborated on China's principled position, pointing out that complex problems do not have simple solutions. No matter how the situation changes, China will adhere to its consistent stance and continue to promote peace and encourage dialogue. China is pleased to see Russia and the United States maintain contact, improve their relations, and advance the process of a political solution to the Ukraine crisis. According to Niu Tongqing's analysis, what both China and Russia mean is, first, Putin briefed China on the situation regarding Russia-US contacts as well as Russia's position. Second, this sentence is crucial. Putin promised that the Russia-China relationship will not change under any circumstances, and that Russia is willing to maintain close communication with China. Third, China reminded Putin that complex problems do not have simple solutions. This statement also carries a lot of meaning. Fourth, there is another sentence that is also key. China is pleased to see Russia and the US improve their relations and promote a resolution to the Ukraine crisis. Russia provides updates, China offers reminders, and Russia also has to promise that the Russia-China relationship will not change under any circumstances. The meaning is, even if they reconcile with the US, their relationship with China will remain unchanged. China also shows great vision by expressing its willingness to see Russia and the US improve their relations and work to resolve the Ukraine issue. According to Niu Tongqing's summary, Western media speculate that the US and Russia might reach an agreement for a ceasefire in place between Russia and Ukraine. The general content might look like this. First, the US would legally recognize Russia's control over Crimea. Second, the US would effectively acknowledge Russia's occupation of all of Luhansk and Kiev, as well as parts of Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. Third, the US would determine that Ukraine cannot join NATO, but Ukraine might become part of the European Union. Fourth, the US would lift the sanctions imposed on Russia since 2014. Fifth, the US would strengthen economic cooperation with Ukraine, especially in the fields of energy and industry. Sixth, Ukraine would receive strong security guarantees. Seventh, a small part of the Kharkiv region occupied by Russian forces would be returned to Ukraine. Eighth, the Dnipro River, which runs along the front lines in southern parts of Ukraine, would remain unobstructed. Ninth, Ukraine would receive compensation and aid for reconstruction. 10th, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant would be recognized as Ukrainian territory, but operated by the United States, supplying electricity to both Ukraine and Russia. To sum up, first, the US and Russia are negotiating a ceasefire plan on the spot, under which Ukraine would regain 20% of the territory occupied by Russia. Ukraine, and even Europe, end up losing everything. The land goes to Russia, the resources go to the US, the debt falls on the EU, and the decline is left to Ukraine. Second, Zelensky doesn't even get to participate in the key decisions. Previously, US media quoted White House sources saying that the precondition for Trump meeting with Putin was that Putin had to agree to meet with Zelensky. But later, Trump personally denied this, saying no, Putin doesn't have to meet with Zelensky. Third, I've always thought that Trump's ultimatums to Russia are all fake, just a show. The only real victim is India, which is going to be hit with an extra 25% tariff by the US taking advantage of the situation. Just as an EU official previously told the media, although Trump talks tough, he hasn't put even the slightest bit of pressure on Putin so far, absolutely none. It really seems like Trump and Putin are putting on a double act. Fourth, if Zelensky opposes the peace agreement set by the US and Russia, then how is this agreement supposed to be implemented? First, the US could push to remove Zelensky from office and replace him with a Ukrainian president who agrees to the deal. And with just one word from the US, they could cut off military supplies to Ukraine and sever NATO's intelligence and information support. What kind of war could Ukraine still fight then? Looks like this war is really coming to an end. On another note, I want to talk about how, despite the tech blockade from the US and the West, China's chip industry is still making waves. According to a Nikkei Asia report on August 8, SMIC co-CEO Zhao Haijun said at the earnings conference that more and more Chinese chip companies are rapidly grabbing market share, surpassing foreign competitors, with some companies achieving tenfold growth in the past 2 years. The progress in the fields of power chips and analog chips is especially remarkable. SMIC announced that its sales revenue for the second quarter of this year reached $2.21 billion, a year-on-year increase of 16.2%. The gross margin was 20.4%, which is a decrease of 2.1 percentage points compared to the previous quarter. The capacity utilization rate reached a high level of 93.5%, up 2.9 percentage points from the previous quarter. The company said that R&D expenses increased compared to the first quarter, and the rise in administrative expenses was mainly due to higher startup costs for new wafer fabs. It seems that SMIC is aggressively ramping up R&D and expanding production, so while the business has grown, the gross margin has actually declined. It is believed that SMIC is actively seizing a lot of domestic substitution business, encouraging mainland users not to buy foreign chips and to use only SMIC chips. Zhao Haijun said that due to the continuously increasing demand from Chinese customers, the company's tight wafer supply situation will persist at least until October. He said that demand for 8-inch wafers has improved significantly, mainly driven by rapid growth from domestic customers as well as increases from international customers. Domestic demand increased tenfold over the past 2 years. For example, clients in highway ICs and power management went from 2,000 to 20,000 wafers monthly. Meanwhile, international orders account for over 50% and continue to grow. Zhao Haijun also said that domestic customers' demand for memory-related chips, such as flash memory controllers, has surged. Even though the smartphone chip market was quite stable that year, SMIC's customers increased their share in the mobile phone supply chain, which also drove up demand. In the last quarter, SMIC's industrial and automotive businesses accounted for about 10.6% of international revenue, and shipments of automotive chips grew steadily by 20% compared to the previous quarter. Nikkei Asia recently reported that China is taking steps to prevent the US from tightening export restrictions, which could hinder the development of domestic autonomous driving and other technologies. Chinese automakers and chip companies are stepping up efforts to develop and adopt domestic products or solutions to replace in-vehicle semiconductors from foreign chip giants like NVIDIA. This aligns closely with China's ambitious goal of achieving 100% localization of automotive chips. To sum it up, amid the wave of domestic substitution, chip giants like SMIC have a bright long-term outlook. Chinese chip companies are rapidly seizing global market share and are surpassing foreign competitors in areas such as power chips and analog chips.